Hello everyone and welcome to the Wicked Weekly. My name's Brian if you happen to be new around here. And in this week we're going to do a deep dive and summary of the interview that Thomas gave to Action RPG. Now I want to say this right out the rip. I'm going to put the top link in the description for this content. It's a 2-hour long podcast. And as a content creator myself, I mean this in all sincerity. I'm not trying to steal their thunder. And so this is just going to be a summary and my thoughts because many of you guys have reached out and asked me for them, especially about this interview, because there's a lot of really good nuggets. There's also a lot of information that if you've been following the Wicked Weekly, you're already well aware of. And again, the content creator in me knows that if you do go and follow that link, give them some watch time because a like is fine. But I know that when my content gets reacted to, generally people come in, they might like it, and then they might just dip out, which then the YouTube algorithm likes to suppress that because the watch time is kind of their key identifier. And also just a note to everybody out there listening. I wasn't able to record this video until much later in the day, so you might hear some of my kids running around or there might be some awkward jump cuts in it. I'll do my best to keep things moving along very nicely. But thank you guys so much. Let's go ahead and dive on in. This video, I think, is going to start with just kind of me addressing kind of the elephant in the room. Just the other day, when I made the original video, I also tweeted out what Thomas shared, and this over on X went incredibly wide for me. You can see when the time I captured it was at 154. I think it's probably coming up on 200,000 impressions, which is pretty big for me over on X. But anyway, I wrote, "Wild news today as No Rest for the Wicked might skip out on Xbox. That just really depends on, seems to be what makes sense for them and for the platform. PS5 and Nintendo Switch have been confirmed. I wonder if this is more just Xbox becoming a PC at this point or whatnot, and asking what do you guys think." This obviously kicked up a lot of the console wars. Thomas weighed in himself saying, there's nothing officially to confirm yet. We want to support all the consoles, and it just looking at the numbers, the PS5 makes the most sense at the moment. Ultimately, they will ship on all platforms, but likely not at the same time. And it's important to note that Thomas also addressed this on the Action RPG podcast, so I think that's something very important. It is coming to all consoles, but the timing of that is a little bit different, and the reason ends up being for this reason. He says, "Folks, we're a comparatively tiny indie studio. Making high quality content port takes a lot of work, so we just have to do what makes the most sense." And this really goes back to my original point about, I wonder if this is more just Xbox becoming a PC. If you don't have to create a console specific build because it's just PC driven, Steam's going to be on the Xbox, Xbox Play Anywhere. And that's the ultimate vibe I got from this. It's not about excluding Xbox. It's about trying to figure out what is the best way forward, because by the time No Rest for the Wicked releases, which we covered in the last video, focusing it on most likely 2026 based off of the latest updates from Thomas himself, well, I think Xbox OS is going to be a thing at that point. So all in all, this is just an interesting question and one that I think we're going to get some more insight into, but this obviously got a lot of people talking over on X. And thank you guys also for those of you who quote tweeted me. I saw a bunch of people kind of stealing the content after that, and that's just the nature of posting on X, so I do appreciate all those, especially Jez, who reached out and asked if he could quote use my post in an article. And speaking of Jez, he shared some interesting news. Just as a brief aside, gamers and your voices, this gives me hope, is that Microsoft is rolling back its $80 price point to go back to $70. And I think this is a real big win. Ultimately, we're going to talk about this with Jez on the podcast next Friday, which he did confirm that he's going to show up on, which is great. So yeah, I'm excited. This is going to be a lot of fun things to talk about. Lots of moving parts within the gaming industry. It's something that I always follow with a great passion because I love gaming and I really love the process of making games. But anyway, on that note, we still got a lot to cover. Again, if you guys want to support the content here for free, also check out the podcast. That is its own channel, The Gaming Roundtable. We record every week. We've been rebranding the channel, so subscriber numbers are down, which is perfectly fine, but watch time and views have been going up. So thank you guys all who've jumped over there to support the channel. Whether you're watching here, you're watching there, all of that is support, and it does mean the world to me. And before we dive in, again, thank you to the 142 you guys who hit that subscribe button here, and those of you who actually go and open up your wallets, Yamrin, Lord Kaz, and Spiritfire. Thank you so much for being members here on the channel. Now, let's talk about this interview. And again, I would really encourage you guys to go check out Action RPG. This entire 2 hours is filled with, it's a really good podcast. It's a really good interview. And I'm so glad they did it. But breaking down the summary and kind of my thoughts, here it is in a nutshell. They talked a lot about the third person camera mode. We covered this a little bit because Thomas has been sharing more gameplay footage. He says that the work is demanding, but it's not actually ultra hard to get in. And I think it's going to be an interesting thing to see how ultimately is received. I'm glad that Thomas is able to go and play and explore. That's the strength that they have as a smaller studio. And he talked about this in the interview, if they were to grow, if they were to double or triple in size, it would get to the point where he can't himself work on the code and work on the games. And coming from Blizzard, which is another portion of what this interview ended up entailing, was kind of his gaming history, where he came from and where he is now, and ultimately where he wants to go with, essentially, for those of you who've been paying attention, a no microtransaction 10-year plan where this is the game and they want to sell expansions to this game. They want to build their Lord of the Rings with the current version 1.0, which is on the horizon, is their Fellowship of the Ring. So this is going to be, I think, a big journey, a long journey, and we're all in on it. And yeah, so the interview covered a lot of questions like that. He also went on to talk about difficulty modes. Basically, the question ends up being, once you're at level cap, what is the reason to play on a harder difficulty? And that's something that they are looking to tackle. And so this naturally shifted into a conversation about Endgame, and Thomas brought up the concept of Final Fantasy Tactics and their endgame, basically giving us all a ton of stuff to level and to master. And the goal is that even after 1,000+ hours at the endgame, you still feel super entertained. And we've talked about the Final Fantasy Tactics influence. If you guys don't know, Final Fantasy Tactics is by far the best Final Fantasy game ever made, in my humble opinion. And I have a very deep love of the Final Fantasy series. And so I think this really is a highlight for what we can all expect. Now, while they then go on to talk about the illusion of choice, aka how he thinks the job system is going to really allow you to, as you grind, as you go and find those reasons to play, to unlock features. And he's mentioned to me in the interview that I sat down with him, and here on this interview as well, the unlocking the ability to walk on water. I think that is really cool, because then you can actually add in things that your build might be able to do that aren't necessarily combat specific, but could give you an advantage in combat, being able to maybe retreat out into the water and still fire your arrows to an enemy who can't come into the water. So there could be some really interesting options when it's all said and done. And that is what I think the job system is going to do. And he talked about how the attribute system isn't really kind of being what it should be. It doesn't feel really good. And to move the attributes that kind of give you the power into the job, aka the class that you're building. Now, all of that, just to set the context from dev to dev, I do not anticipate this system rolling out until what they've deemed the Combat 2.0 milestone update. This kind of bodes into the question, because we'll talk about this. There's a clip on this here in a little bit that I'd like to share with you regarding kind of an upcoming roadmap. But just note, we've got some of that stuff on the way, and we'll get more into that here in just a second. Then when asked, is there anything coming with multiplayer? I think this is where longtime fans and people who've been following the content here are going to be excited. And yes, while he hasn't, and he's not going yet into what is going to be included with multiplayer, we do know they've said no PvP with multiplayer just yet. But that will come, and that's going to come at some point, when it's ready, once the multiplayer is in place. But more content, more weapons, things like that. Now, for those of us who are looking forward to the next step in the story to see where it goes from here, that is still going to be a little whiles away. I do not anticipate, main story kind of progress. We might see some more side quests and things like that, but I don't want to set the expectation too high. For me, multiplayer just needs to deliver, and it just needs to work. I can't wait for us to all be able to play together, but on that note, it isn't just going to be multiplayer, because it would also kind of feel stale for those of us who've been putting hundreds of hours into it. So it's going to be a balance. It's going to be interesting to see ultimately what shakes out. And as soon as we know more, I'll be sure to cover it here for you guys on the channel. Now, the other questions kind of were centered around the challenge between investing in your character versus the action or the ARPG seasonal reset. because Thomas said this. He's like, there is reason that both sides are right. You want to invest in your character. You want your character to continue to persist. And then the journey aspect of the seasonal reset. So he talked about their solution to this is what would be called the rebirth system. Immediately, I go into Prestige. If anybody is out there played like Call of Duty, where you hit level cap and then you as the player get to choose to Prestige. And that's the vibe that I got from his answer. But a rebirth system sounds pretty interesting, where there is a benefit to you by doing the rebirth system. However, that means like your house is protected, but maybe not your stuff or something like that. Ultimately, this is just kind of the first that I've heard of him use that. So we're going to be tracking kind of that as a backlog item as the game continues to progress. He goes on to iterate, especially when it comes to multiplayer, their ultimate goal, and this ties into the start of what I talked about in this video. They want the game everywhere. It's cross-play, cross-save, cross-progression, all of it. You log in, you got your account, and then you can go and play. You will have to purchase the game on other platforms because that's just the nature of the beast. So there's no cross-buy here, except for maybe Microsoft Play Anywhere, and that in and of itself is something I'm watching with a great interest. However, I think that's going to be and bode very well for the game. So even despite the fact that, let's say it does roll out later on Xbox than it does everywhere else, while that is frustrating because Xbox is something that I enjoy the Xbox controller. That's what I use. We have Xboxes in the house. We have Nintendo Switches in the house. Those are the platforms we have because most of our gaming is all on PC and cloud now. So like, there is a lot of moving parts. And so that's why I'm never frustrated. I just can't relate to the console wars online. I think I got to view it pure entertainment. And some of y'all's emails that y'all sent me, by the way, chef's kiss, so entertaining. But I hope that they were sent with the entertainment mindset. I'm choosing to give you guys the benefit of the doubt on this one, but it is what it is, and people will people. But anyway, then he was asked about training dummies. This is something that's been requested. It is in development. So meaning they want the ability to let you play around with runes against a training dummy and see what you ultimately vibe with. I think that's going to be a really nice addition. No ETA on that just yet. Cosmetic pets is on the wish list, so it is not actively in development. And this, I think, we'll all really sing when we get an updated roadmap, but we'll jump into that in a second. Regarding expansions, these are going to act as different acts, different stories. So Wicked 1.0 is going to be Act 1. You could almost think 2.0 is going to be Act 2. That's going to be probably an expansion, 3.0 and so on. And they're aiming for 5 to 10 years. And so in my mind, what I read that on how I vibe with that is I think they might be targeting an expansion every 2 years, roughly speaking, or 2.5 years or so, because that would put the game from release right into that kind of sweet spot for supporting the game for 10 years with content. And you might even be able to put in more story or more. Ultimately, we know Moon Studios likes to take their time and really cook. And ultimately, when we start to think about that as a potential velocity, as a potential time frame, you can start to see how 2026 is going to be a real good kickoff, and that's going to run us for quite some time. Obviously, sales are going to be mattering. These devs are independently published. So every sale means more to them than it did whenever they were working with a publisher. All right. He also went on, and this is something interesting because it's in a way Animal Crossing-esque with like real-time events that happen every year. So like, for example, a week in December, certain enemies might appear that only appear during that week. It makes me think of certain, things happening within the game that happen and are tied to a real calendar-esque system. I'm really interested in that because player trade. However, they're going to have to solve the bigger player trade question if they're going to do things like that, because if there becomes a meta in which you need something that you can only farm for a specific time of year, and the only way is to do player trade, I think that opens up players to a lot of risk in terms of trying to find that and navigate that online. I think video games should just freaking handle it, and that's going to be some feedback that I continue to provide to the devs. And personally speaking, the way I would handle it is a global auction system for trade. So if you wanted to list something up, people could bid on it, and the highest wins or the closest to the price wins. I always go to Final Fantasy XI's auction house system, which I feel ends up being quite nice. Even though I would love for them to actually invest in 11 and refresh that into kind of a modern, graphics engine and more. More on that later. We've been playing Final Fantasy 11 and it's been wonderful. All right. And then he was asked especially about Last Epoch. Has he played? And this really kind of ties back into Endgame. The guys over at Action RPG praised the Last Epoch's faction endgame grinding system. And Thomas said that he would go and look and check it out. He hadn't played Last Epoch, but he would love to do some kind of roundtable with all those out there making action RPGs. And if you guys haven't got the vibe, Thomas doesn't have any issue sharing his thoughts. I'm sure there are people out there who wish that he would just not share his thoughts and focus in on making a game. And that's their right to have that opinion, but that's just not going to really kind of rein him in. And I'm all in. I think it's great. I love it when devs are honest and open, and that's ultimately what we get from Thomas and more. So that's why we get to talk about this game so much. And it helps in my worldview, and you can let me know in the comments or in Discord if you want. It helps pass the time between these updates that we're getting. Now, on that note, we talked about the roadmap. I want to toss over to Thomas now and highlight this as a clip for you guys so we can kind of talk about it.
Do you plan on releasing an updated roadmap for early access?
Yeah, but we want to do it in a more official manner, right? Like if you look at the roadmap that we already had, we basically flipped one of the things around, meaning multiplayer and the breach. So we did breach first, simply because we wanted to have, once multiplayer ships, we wanted to have a bigger world. And I think that was a good thing to do, because now the world is pretty big already. It will be even bigger at 1.0, but now once multiplayer ships, you have a pretty big world to explore, which is good. But then on top of that, we will have a more detailed roadmap pretty soon, but in a more official manner.
Now, my personal view about a roadmap is it acts as a promise. And I do think the shift that they made from the previous roadmap was the right call, even though it did frustrate people because they were like, wait, multiplayer should have already been there. Why did we get the breach before multiplayer? The TLDR, for those who haven't been, absolutely following everything they've been saying, is that the Private Division, which was their publisher, which got sold off, all of that changed. Pretty much their strategy and plan and more. Private Division was the one who kind of put out that roadmap. Now they're in the full driving seat, and they saw that if they were going to add in multiplayer, they really needed more content to be ready. The kids are going nuts in the background. I told you it would happen. All right. On that note, though, it's that I think that with this upcoming roadmap that we're eventually going to get, it's going to act as a promise. And as long as they can hit that promise, I don't think they're going to give us specific dates, but it would be in what I would call the road to release, where it's like, okay, now multiplayer's out. We talked about Sanctuary update. We talked about, the Combat 2.0 update. What is all this? How does all this fall in? And that's essentially what it's going to be. And then that way he can list out various features. I like how New World handles it because it's okay to be a little bit vague. In fact, if they've got big visions, I think they can go ahead and put those on like year 5, year 10, like, hey, this is what we're thinking. This could change versus this is what we're going to be looking at within the next 12 months, the next, 24 months, the next 36 months. And so that way we can start to know that, hey, if something is coming and it's on the roadmap, because you might ask me about it, I'll have an answer. Be like, hey, they've talked about it. It's, it's currently being explored design wise. That would tell me that it's at a minimum 18 months if it's being explored, right? Because game development's hard and it takes a lot of time. And I always try to give you guys the estimates of what is happening behind the scenes in hopes to, just educate us all, on that process. Now, the other clip that I want to highlight, which I found deeply interesting, was this clip that was talking about how do you market this game? Is it an action RPG? Is it a Souls-like RPG? There are some challenges with that. So I'm going to let them take it over.
I think the hardest part for Wicked will be the marketing of the game. I covered this on YouTube early on, even before early access. And it's, obviously everyone always talks about the tweet like Diablo, Path of Exile, we're coming for you. And then, you see the gameplay and it's like, this is the most beautiful isometric action RPG. The sound is awesome. The combat is awesome. The visuals are awesome. And the studio that brought us Ori that everybody loves is literally calling out the two big dogs. Like, oh man, the little guys coming after them and they're creating this handcrafted world. And then you play Wicked and it's like you're dying on the boat because you don't realize that it does play different. So then it's like, well, wait, are you a Diablo-like isometric action RPG, or are you an isometric Souls-like, like Dark Souls? Because then I think to the player base, you're like, well, why are you even talking about Diablo? Because your game isn't like Diablo, right? So I don't know how you bridge that gap. And I know now I'm just kind of rambling too, but I think that that is going to be a huge part for Wicked and just getting the name out and moving forward, especially without the seasonal model, because they're going to be like, okay, when's season 1? And it's like, there is no season 1. This is like Grim Dawn. This is like Titan Quest, where we're going to do DLCs.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Obviously, our marketing folks are currently talking and thinking through a bunch of this stuff, right? On like, how do we get the message out there? How do we make it perfectly clear to everybody, right? To some degree, also, I do want to stay in this thing of like, I don't want to be boxed in, right?
For sure.
I want Wicked to be like, not like, I don't want to fall into, oh, it has to be either like Diablo or a Souls game, right? I think the goal is, no, we'll craft something fresh and new, and hopefully we'll find our own niche, and hopefully it's not a small niche, right? Hopefully it's a pretty big one. But it's similar to Apple back then, right? Apple in the early 2000s, like, didn't have a lot of, like, they had like, 2% market share or something, right? And then by doing more and more stuff and so on, and then ultimately doing the iPhone, right? That's where it blew up. I think there's a magic formula that you have to hit where you just craft the experience so it's the thing for most people, right? That's what we were going to get to. We don't want to craft the next Souls game or the next Diablo game. We want No Rest for the Wicked to be No Rest for the Wicked. And that's difficult because it's like it comes with, teaching the audience that, oh, there's a new thing, right? Like, and it doesn't play like the old thing that you already know, right? It has its own thing going on, but engage with it because you'll get a shit ton of fun out of it.
Yeah, you're almost trying to like make your own genre. You want it to be like Wicked-like,
Exactly. That's what I think will happen. By the way, I do think, like, I do think, because this has already happened before, right? When we released Ori, Metroidvania, there were other studios. Like, I know EA basically told me back then that they opened up a whole new studio and made Fe just to kind of like compete with Ori, right? Because with Ori, you sold 15 million copies, which is crazy. Like, that was just nuts. And so even Insomniac did Song of the Deep or something, right? And they all kind of found out that, oh, it's actually not that easy to make a 2D Metroidvania, right? It's fucking brutally difficult because of the genre that it is. I think a lot of people ultimately will take some of that stuff over that we're doing with Wicked, and I think that's a good thing. The idea generally is to push the genre forward, to do all the things at Moon, because that's what we can do that a Blizzard couldn't do, a Grinding Gear couldn't do, right? Where we try to push the genre into new directions and innovate full front, right? Like on every single thing that we can, to find that new audience and to find, like to get people engaged with it. Because you're not going to get that out of Blizzard and so on. They're not, like, even with Diablo 4 already, they had this problem, right? Where initially they had Josh Moscara working on it, who basically wanted to do a Souls like Diablo, and Blizzard immediately burned it down, right? And was like, this is not Diablo, you can't do that, right? And it's just, shit, I would have really liked to see that version, right? From the guy who made Reaper of Souls, right? That I would have wanted to see
this is not
that
Diablo.
Version, something new. Yeah.
Diablo 2 started like that. If you played Diablo 2 when it first came out, they didn't have mana pots. If you missed your fireball, it was a big deal.
You're in trouble.
When they're saying this isn't Diablo, they're saying this isn't like Diablo 3. Like,
I think that's the problem in the thinking, right? That it's just this whole, oh, it has to be exactly the same as the other thing, just with better graphics and so on, right? But if you think that way, well, you will never reach the next big thing because you're constraining yourself to what was already done before, right? That's where I think we all have to be a little bit okay with, no, it's not Diablo and it's not Souls. It's a new thing, right? And that's okay. And let's appreciate that and let's just get into it. But it's difficult in terms of marketing, right? Like, people want a simple, clear message. I get that as well, but we'll have to see.
And we will have to see indeed. I'm all for the Wicked like. I'm all for them forging a path, and honestly, if they succeed, just like we've seen with genres in the past where it's like you compare it to what's come before and then eventually it becomes the thing that's set in stone, while difficult, I think it's achievable. And based off of everything we've played, everything we've seen so far, I honestly, I could see that absolutely coming true. So I'm along for the ride. I'm enjoying my time with this game, and I really hope that you guys are as well. I do appreciate those of you who made it to the end of this video, because your support in just watching these videos really means the world to me. I cannot thank you enough. You truly are a legend, and I thank you. I thank you. I thank you. Now, on that note, I don't want to ramble and waste any more of your time. I hope YouTube's got something fun for you. If not, check whatever pops up on screen. Maybe go check out another video, or again, I invite you to check out the podcast. We're going to talk about the No Rest for the Wicked Xbox stuff and the interview on this week's show. So hope to see you over there. But until next time, take care.
Change your prime, hit that start. Catholic heart with a gamer's art. 6 kids deep, but the quest goes on. Quest continue till the break of dawn. Raise that chalice, light the flame. In the house and in the game. Pixel prayers and dad mode crime. One more level, it's redemption time.